thanks for coming. I work at the Conservancy. This is where you can find us on the internet. Bacon and Coconut's me. That's not a nonprofit. But Conservancy is a nonprofit organization, and as Marcus said, we are the fiscal home for Selenium. And that means a lot of different things. I'm going to try and make this fun, because sometimes people are like, nonprofit governance, like, I do this work because I love it. I think free software is really important. I think nonprofits are really important for free software. So, like I said, Selenium is under our fiscal umbrella. So we do a lot of things for them. We're really kind of multifaceted in that way. So I'll get into some of that. But you're probably like, who's this lady? So first, I'm the Director of Community Operations at the Software Freedom Conservancy, which means I'm the first line of communication for our member projects. Conservancy used to be a little bit smaller, and we had one person who did all the things, and that was a little inefficient. So now we've got like one person who focuses on legal stuff, one person who focuses on accounting, and I focus on communications with our member projects. I also used to be a political organizer, so I'm sort of used to herding cats, and a former promoter of local noise rock in Boston, Massachusetts, where I live, which is also like herding cats, except they're drunk. And I have a painting and sculpting degree, which is a weird way to end up in tech. And I can code, but I don't usually. I'm really glad that lots of people like to code, because my code is pretty ugly. So let's see. So most of the things that I learned about communities, I learned by booking bands. Like I said, the drunk cats. When it starts to make more sense, you think about, like, there's this mix of people there. Like, sometimes when you have people together, doing a shared activity, it can get kind of funny, right? Like, so political organizations, nonprofits, open source, music scenes, all made of people. People there for different reasons, like sometimes personal, passionate reasons. And that refers to a lot of open source projects. Like, people are there for like passion, but also their job. And that can get like a little weird, because it's like, where's the line? Like, oh, yes, of course, I'm dressed up as Thor for work. Like, what happened? Oh, it's good. And these are fine folks. These are Red Hat folks. So they've done a lot of like mixing passion with their paid job, which is awesome. If you can have fun at work, that's great, right? Who doesn't want to have fun at work? The trick is to make sure that it's fun for everyone, right? So some of the ways that you organize a mix of paid and unpaid people with different motivations that work at different places can get kind of messy. So we try to help our projects with governance. And it was the same with rock bands, actually. Because some folks are in bands, they're like, I am going to eventually only do music for a living. I'm going to be a rock star. I'm going to tour the world in hotels, private jets, all of that thing. And other people are there just like, I just like to play, man. So it's like this really different mix of things. And you encounter this also in open source communities, where someone's like, cool, so our exit strategy is we get bought, I get a ton of money, we never work again. And someone else is just like, I just didn't like how you couldn't do this one thing in the app. Like, so these are really different motivations to try and manage. So with the bands, a little success made it really messy. Like, they just didn't always know what to do with that. It brings a lot of extra responsibilities. Like, once money gets involved, it gets really messy. You think like, oh, money's great. Why wouldn't you not want money? But once you have money, you have to decide what to do with it and how to spend it. And so we had when I used to book bands, sometimes they would be on their first tour ever, which was like so sweet. They were like, oh, how many guest rooms do you have? I'm like, how many sleeping bags did you bring? So, it was a little bit of like, oh, this is going to be a little different than just playing at the place up the street from us. I had one band show up, first tour. They needed 8 of these. I had booked them at a dive bar. This is an XLR cable for the musicians in the room. A dive bar does not have more usually than 2 of these that actually work, and 8 is kind of a lot. And they were like, yeah, we absolutely can't play without 8 of these. I'm like, you probably should have mentioned that before you showed up. And also, these are not that big. You should have brought some with you. It was like this interesting like indoctrination process of like, okay, so it falls on me to say, welcome to tour. You're going to play places where everything isn't set up for you. You have new responsibilities that you have to kind of take care of yourself, right? So that's a little bit tricky. There are other endeavors, like, if you're like a professional gymnast, like someone buys this ribbon for you, everything is set up, there's lots of infrastructure, it's easy, you just show up in your leotard, you're ready to go. So we thought, what if we could make being in an open source project a little bit more like being a gymnast and a little less like being a rock star, with all of those kinds of things. So one of the things that we do, so what we do at Conservancy, we try and help our budding projects that are starting to experience a little bit of success with their new responsibilities. So a little bit of free and open source software history. A lot of projects famously, like you go back 30 years ago when free software was started, or 20 years ago when the term open source was coined to refer to the business year end of free software. A lot of that was just like folks doing things on their own, like on their own time, like in garages, stuff like that. And so there was no governance. It was like, who has the most time to post on the mailing list? Your idea wins. And so for better or worse, this produced a lot of different software that we still use today, like the Linux kernel, which is probably on every device, on every phone in this room, at least the Android ones, and many of the websites that you might be accessing if you're surfing the web while I'm talking. So that produced a lot of great software, but it didn't always produce great communities. So it's a little bit of a luxury to spend your weekend or your time when you're supposed to be working doing a itch scratching kind of thing. So if you're doing something for fun, like 30 hours of something for fun, that is a luxury. Not everyone can do that. I don't know if you've noticed, but like the itch scratching doesn't always pay the bills, right? So software projects that grew out of this like garage or like mailing list, like meritocracy situation needed a little bit more structure to succeed and to stay relevant and to make sure someone was fixing bugs and that it had all of the other things that software projects need to succeed, like documentation and a website that actually explains what the software does. So some of those projects ended up at companies, and that's great. Red Hat has a big Linux distribution. There's a lot of Red Hat pictures on Flickr, in case you're wondering. But other projects, like they started their own company. There's a couple database companies that are based on open source databases. Other ones went a different direction. A lot of programming languages ended up starting their own nonprofit organizations to act as an umbrella for the projects that are based on their programming language. So all of the libraries and all of those things are like under, like, say, the Python Software Foundation. So that's great for the projects that got picked up, but not everybody got picked up. So what if you wanted to like roll your own and incorporate it yourself? Has anyone tried to incorporate or start a business in the audience? Okay, so maybe like 10%. Was it fun? No hands. Okay, it involves a lot of paperwork. It's a pain in the you-know-what. So, especially if you're like 3 people that are working on code, and it's like, who wants to stop working on code and take on 2 weeks of incorporating this stuff? No one. So Bradley Kuhn founded the Software Freedom Conservancy while he was working at the Software Freedom Law Center in 2006 because he kept meeting projects that were like, yeah, we actually don't want money because no one wants to put it in their bank account and pay taxes on it. And he was like, but you all are not getting paid for the work and you're trying to put in all these hours, but you don't want money, so this is not good. So he set up the Software Freedom Conservancy so that projects could take money and not put it in one person's personal bank account and then pay for development. So when we first started doing that, it was there were not a lot of like fiscal umbrellas out there. So we ended up with like a mix of projects. So the other fiscal umbrellas that were out there were all like really tightly focused on one type of thing. Our focus is software freedom. So we want projects that are fulfilling the mission of driving software freedom by providing like a vendor-neutral, open, community-driven project that anyone can use. So when we first started, it was just a couple projects, and like I said, one person who did all the things, which, if you've met Bradley, you can understand why that worked as long as it did, but for most people, doing all the things for a whole bunch of projects is too many things. And now, we have actually a lot of projects. So we have over 40 projects, and we do all the things for all of the projects. So accounting, trademark registration, domain registration. We help them with vendor contracts, like all of these different things. We also do a couple things in common for some of our projects. This is us last year at the Copyleft Conference, first annual. We care deeply about free software licensing. Whether it's copyleft or not, we want to make sure that the conversation around free software licensing includes a community voice and how decisions and innovations in the licensing area affect community-driven projects. And that means making sure that we're keeping an eye on some of the court cases that threaten to undermine the reality of like how we understand free software licensing to work. So we're shepherding that conversation, and we're writing about that also. So we want to make sure that those licenses that our projects are built on top of maintain like the, kind of strength that we intend them to. So we help our projects get to the next level. Like a lot of times, like we get projects that are very new, they don't know how to do a lot of things, and that's okay. Like, we don't need every single person to learn how to talk to the IRS. That doesn't seem like a net good for the free software community to have like 150 people who are expert in talking to the IRS. So we want to help our projects grow, and that means getting all of that stuff off the table so that they can get back to what they do best. So you have like a team of experts at the Conservancy. In addition to it being time-consuming to learn how to do tax filings or do a trademark registration, people don't always do the best job at something when they're not an expert at it. Do people know what this is? Yeah. This is like, painting, how hard can it be? Turns out taxes also, how hard can it be? The IRS doesn't really like to hear like, we did a release last week. I'm so sorry about the tax return. You totally understand, right? Not at all. Not at all. They're not into that at all. So we're your team of experts on all of those things. So you don't have to task a volunteer to do something that they don't want to do. There's nothing quicker to get a volunteer out of your organization than to ask them to do the accounting. I've seen it before, and they're like, somehow I got guilted into doing all of the accounting. I'm going to ghost you all, and then I'm going to tell everyone outside of our circle how much I hate you. Like, okay, so don't do that to your volunteers. If you have a small project and you think you might have some accounting in your future, find a fiscal sponsor so that you don't drive someone away who takes up the accounting out of guilt. So you can maybe think of us as like a tool library. So we have someone who's an expert on trademarks. We have someone who looks at contracts. Well, we have a couple of people who look at contracts. We're trying to work a little bit more on that because contracts are difficult. I don't know if you've ever tried to negotiate a vendor contract. For some reason, they just like to put in a lot of weird stuff. Like it seems to be this contract writing seems to be this place where like first-year lawyers land and they're like, I know, why don't we make sure that the organization renting this conference venue is responsible for lightning bolts striking people on stage, just in case. Like, let's put that liability on their plate. It's like, what? So you need someone who knows how to look at these things and can do these things. So we're like kind of a tool library. And especially like accounting. You might think that's fun, accounting, like, woo, money. It's usually not. It's more like a lot of spreadsheets. And I'm a person who likes budgets. Like, I have been involved in a lot of different nonprofits over the years, and usually people are like, oh, it's time to do a budget. And I'm like, the budget's cool. That's how we know what we're going to do next year. Like, how do we know if we can, like, all go to Tokyo if we don't have a budget? Like, or how do we know if we're going to be able to keep the lights on next year if we don't have a budget? For me, it's fun to know that the lights will stay on, and that we're going to be able to continue to keep paying people the things that we said we'd pay them. So I love budgets. And when I get to organizations, I like to get into the budgets and color code them all up or whatever. Remember the painting and sculpting degree? My budgets look a little like Rainbow Bright has done them. But I'm not the person who does the bulk of our budgets. This year, instead of having like everyone pitch in a little on the accounting, we hired a full-time accountant. So, woo, Roseanne. And she is great. Last week she asked me for a receipt for a hotel I haven't stayed at yet. And I was like, whoa, that's like, she's so on top of this stuff, she's asking me for receipts from the future. So I was like, that's amazing. And she's like, you're weird. And I'm like, it's okay. It's still amazing. So she's doing a great job. So I know we have had some problems in the past where some of the accounting stuff has been slower than we would have liked between Selenium and Conservancy. But we've heard you and a couple of our other member projects, to be honest. And so we have a full-time accountant now. So Roseanne is on top of our stuff in that regard. Accounting is a big chunk of what we do, but it's not the only thing we do. We do provide like a neutral ground for our projects to develop software. So it's hard to develop software that's like neutral and open in a for-profit setting because it ends up like kind of like, oh, we want it to be like this and we want it to be like that. Like we've seen the thing where like companies are always trying to pull on a shared platform and get things in where they're like, oh, hey, it's cool to be here on this shared platform. I'm at company A. Could we put something in that like totally tanks company B's installation? Because that would be awesome. And it's like, no, we can't put that into the upstream. So the neutral ground is another thing. It's why we have so many companies here that are able to build on top of Selenium without sniping at each other, I hope, or I haven't heard the sniping. But it's very key to be able to have that neutral ground, and the nonprofit provides that. A for-profit, you got to make money at whatever cost, and so you just sort of have to figure out like which dog you're going to back in the race. But neutral ground means that it stays open for everyone, and Selenium is community-driven, which is great because then it's not. So you build your business on top of this open source platform. Awesome. What happens if then they start having secret conversations about the roadmap and the technical direction of the project? You could be completely screwed over the following year. That's no good. Community-driven is very important to us. We want to see projects that are involving the community, keeping the community in the loop. You can see this is from the Chicago talk. I don't know how many of you were in Chicago. We're far from Chicago, so again, maybe like 10%. But this is like, hey, here's what's going on with the project. It's like in public at a conference, and then it's on YouTube, so if you miss the conference, there's no secret like, oh, I wonder what Selenium's up to next. It's like, oh, here's Jim and Simon telling you, hey, here's what Selenium's up to next. And there will be a committers panel tomorrow, so you can find out exactly what's going on. So like, open platform that anyone can build on top of, and then transparent communication with the community so that you know what's going to be coming next. And that's really important if you want to have something that is built in the public interest that anyone can use. So the shared platform is not only good for like kind of the nice ecosystem thing, it's also good for practitioners, which is really great. So I suspect a handful of you came here maybe thinking you might get a new job out of this networking fest. You don't have to, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands in case you're sitting next to your current boss, but one of the things that is amazing about having an open source platform is that you can take your expertise with you. So if you don't like your employer, or you feel like they don't know what you're worth, or they just are kind of like grumpy and crotchety to work for, like you can just take your whole expertise somewhere else because it's open and there are a ton of other companies built on top of that same technology, as opposed to working somewhere weird where it's like, oh, I used this thing at this company that I worked at for 5 years that no one's ever heard of and no one else uses, so you'll have to train me. Not as good of a bargaining position as like, yeah, I'm using the standard in the field. It's Selenium, like I did it here, I can do it there. So I feel like one of the things that's great about open source is that it empowers practitioners to go ahead and get raises and find new employers. Sorry to current employers, in case people didn't know. The other thing that we're really interested in is ethical technology. And that's really important to us, to see technology being built in a way that empowers users so that source code's available. There's not secret weird stuff in there that's like spying on you or tracking you. You can customize it so that it works well for you. I think that's a great thing about Selenium, like doing testing on multiple browsers so that every single person with any kind of browser is included, as opposed to like, well, we made it so you can only test for one kind of default type of person. This makes it so that everybody can participate. And all of our projects do that in some way or another. Some do it in a little bit more of a meta way. Not all of these projects are software projects. Like we have Teaching Open Source provides curricula to teach students how to use open source development models and how to get involved in open source projects. One that might be interesting to you is the Outreachy project. This is an internship that brings folks in from underrepresented groups, pays them to work on free software for 3 months. And you might think like, oh, well, that sounds nice, but 3 people a year, is that really all that effective? And we found that it's very effective. A lot of the folks who intern through the Outreachy program end up working at one of the companies that they worked with during their internship. They've given talks at conferences like this, and then it becomes this sort of recursive thing where they end up mentoring other interns. So if you had like maybe only one person who was interested in mentoring at your company, and then you got an Outreachy intern, you ended up hiring them, and then 2 years later, you have 2 people that like mentoring folks. So then you could have 2 interns. So it ends up building a completely different sort of public picture of your organization. And it helps you kind of streamline your contribution processes for new people as well. So even folks that don't participate in the internship would benefit from like, oh, hey, the repository is sort of organized and a dream to go looking for stuff in now. And it's like, yeah, we set it up for interns. And it's like, oh, guess what? I actually only had an hour today to file this bug, so it's set up great for me too. So that's a great thing. And if you didn't already catch, I think it would be amazing to see Outreachy interns working on Selenium. And I'll talk about that more at office hours or any of the companies that participate and think they would be interested in having someone get paid to work on their software from an underrepresented group. So Selenium. We love Selenium. Selenium's been really great. So I've been at the Conservancy for about 1.5 years. And like I said, I do a lot of the conversations with our member projects, but I also do a lot of the front-facing conversations with the general public. We do booths at some of the larger open source conferences, and people, they see that field of different projects, and they're like, oh, Selenium. And that's one of the ones that they recognize. We talked about you a lot this year, actually. We love Selenium. I love how welcoming it is. I saw the code of conduct posters all over the place. We have a few projects that we're trying to bring over into the modern era where it's cool to be nice and not slag on people from the stage. So we love that. The welcoming is fantastic. And I know as a speaker, I got a lot of lovely communication, are you good? Do you need anything? Here's what you're gonna need when you arrive. So if you were a first-time speaker, a Selenium conference would be an amazing place to debut your speakership. So welcoming for attendees and then also for speakers, which is awesome. We get to work with these lovely folks. This is your project leadership committee. So when we do our nuts and bolts work, some of you are here. I see Ashley in the front row. I assume everyone, you guys are Selenium famous, right? No? Everyone knows who these folks are? Oh, that was embarrassing. I'm sorry. All right, we'll fix that later. I'll show you their pictures on LinkedIn at the office hours. Anyway, they do lots and lots of work. Not even Simon, really? Okay. Simon is famous. The rest of us are just doing the work. Okay, that's fine. But so when Selenium wants to spend money or has a contract to look at or needs a lawyer to say something about something or has a question like we're wondering if this is a trademark infringement, it goes to this list of folks and I read it and then I figure out who on staff at the Conservancy is the right person to make sure that happens. So, and everyone is lovely, so it's good. It's nice. We have some itchier projects, but and that's okay. That's okay. Some people are itchy. Life did them wrong. It's okay. But it is nice when we have projects that are like, yay! It's a pleasure to be here. We help Selenium with its sponsors, so that I didn't have room for all of them. You have a lot of sponsors, which is awesome. But so we send out invoices for all of these sponsors, and again, that's one of those things that's getting faster now that we have a full-time accountant. So I know some of you probably work for some of the sponsors, and you've noticed the slightly slow pace in the past, so that's getting better. And we want to continue to see that get better and better. The other thing that I think is amazing is that the W3C recommendation from middle of last year, I think this is so cool. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, right down the street from the W3C, and they're like kind of an academic big deal over there. It's a thing, right? It's like, we have a couple of those in Cambridge. You definitely hear oh yeah, I'm at Harvard. Well, it's the same with the W3C. It's like a big deal. People are like, oh yeah, I just work at this little, W3C. And you expect people to go oh my gosh, that's so great. So important and prestigious. And it's true because it's meaningful. This is everyone who does web development has now been told that the Selenium WebDriver is the tool for the job. This guy invented the internet, so that's good. It also means that the default now in the field is open. It's if you're gonna come into this space and be oh, I have a proprietary tool, and it's this area of web development, the default's open. Why would we want a proprietary thing in there? W3C already said this one's the best, so, so that's awesome, because we want to see more folks being, inspired to build more free software on top of the free software, so there's all the free software everywhere. That's kind of our jam, so. Okay, so let's see. I told you guys that I have a painting and sculpting degree, but I didn't tell you why, right? I had this outsized idea about how important painters were. It's something when there's a whole swath of history where there's 2 popes, 15 painters, and maybe 1 president. And you're okay, so painting is the path to changing the world, obviously, unless you want to run for president, which, anyway. So I had this idea that I was going to change the world, so I got a painting and sculpting degree. I did learn over the course of that was probably not going to be the most efficient path to changing the world. And I do just want to say, I watched this talk recently from Erica Joy Baker about changing the world and technology. It's amazing. You should definitely watch it. I don't know her. She's not my friend. She didn't slip me $50 to say this. But it's she's looking at this hey, technology, we're going to change the world. And we are. And she asks a lot of those uncomfortable questions exactly what way are we changing the world? Are we changing the world in the way that we want to? So, and I have been thinking about that also, especially with our projects and how we help them do what they do. So this is the famous quote from Mark Anderson for software is eating the world. Have people heard this before? Mm-hmm. To me, that sounds kind of menacing, right? It sounds like robot spiders are going to come and take all our stuff. And I'm not even like a anti-spider person particularly, but the idea of robot spiders coming to take all our stuff, it's not very comforting to me, right? So software eating the world doesn't sound that great. Software is changing the world. Probably everyone in the room has said that at some point, even if it's only at Thanksgiving to explain to your family like what you do for a living and why it's okay that you just fuss with computers all day. But that one, it sounds like kind of passive. It sounds like the software is happening to us. And that's weird. It's like, why are we like removed from that conversation? Like, software is changing the world. And it's like, who's software? And it's like, software. Like, oh, okay. So like, but software itself, like we haven't yet gotten to the place where software walks around and has its own ideas about what it should do, mostly. Mostly, but not all of the parts are being changed in the same way. This is like a little bit like that William Gibson quote about like, the future's here, just really unevenly distributed. Because like some people are getting like a fancy, if sometimes weird and off-putting sort of changing the world with technology, and then other people are getting like, who ate the other half of the corn? Oh, like some data company has the other half of your corn, sorry. Like, okay, so we're getting like software's changing the world, but like it's a really different experience for different people. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, sometimes in the same time. It's like, what's going on? So what can we do? I mean, the answer is like more of what we're already doing. I don't know if you saw the talk on ethics earlier from Agis. That was fantastic. Go back, watch that one on YouTube if you were in the other session. Building ethical software that is open and community-driven. We can't build good software for people if we aren't interested in talking to the people who are using the software. Like, it's sort of like buying a sweater for someone but not checking what size they wear. They're not gonna enjoy that. Or if they're like allergic to wool, what if they're allergic to wool? You can't buy a sweater for someone without knowing these things. And then while improving user experience and cultivating inclusive communities, which is super important. Again, if people are not at the table, the things we build are not going to include them. So I hope that we will continue to work on this together. Selenium and Conservancy as pals, so I'm kind of like, yes, I hope we're going to do that. Because everyone here has been really amazing. And I think we could, we've already done a lot together, and I think we could do so much more. And I'm looking forward to like the next things that we're able to do. I'm looking forward to coming back in a year and being like, what did we accomplish this year, Selenium and Conservancy? So maybe like instead of software, whoever software is changing the world, we could just kind of own it and say we're changing the world. And we're doing it together, which I think is the way we got to do it. So I have picture credits. I did leave time for pictures, for questions, and in case you have any. So thanks so much for having me come and talk about Conservancy and Selenium.